Hello Clarkston, welcome back to Real Learning. Here we showcase the excellent learning and teaching that take place each day in the Clarkston Community Schools. We are again seated at a dinner table. The reason for this is to represent the power and necessity of dinner table conversations among families. It is at the table with people who care about each other that kids can look their siblings and parents in the eyes, listen to their voices, and develop empathy. Here it is safe for children and adults to try out ideas, to share their fears, and to truly understand one another. It is my hope that each of Clarkston's 8,000 students has dinner with his or her family multiple times each week. I hope that families will make this self-free zone times so that real listening and learning can take place. Our third guest on Real Learning is Mrs. April Kosin, who teaches science at Clarkston Jr. High School. She's also a basketball coach. Welcome, April.
Thank you for having me here
today. Thank you for being here. April, will you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yes. I am currently teaching in Clarkston. I've been teaching 22 years now, and proudly to say that I've been teaching 17 years in Clarkston, where I love being. I'm also a coach. I've been coaching 25 years of basketball, both at the varsity level down to 5th grade level, both boys and girls. It's a very big passion of mine. And I'm happily married to a wonderful husband, Mr. Jeff Kosin, who's currently the assistant principal here at Clarkston Jr. High School. But most importantly, I'm a proud mom of 3 boys that currently go to Clarkston schools. I have a 13-year-old Blake, who's at Sashbaugh Middle School, and I have a 10-year-old Brody, who's at Clarkston Elementary, along with his youngest brother, Brooks, who's 7.
Thank you very much for being here. We really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
So can you tell us a little bit about your philosophy of teaching and how you arrived at that philosophy?
I sure can. If I were to sit here and tell you my entire philosophy, we might be here for a long time. But to summarize it, the most important thing for me when kids walk into my classroom is to develop the love for learning. I want them to become independent learners so that when they walk through my door, they want to be there. They want to learn the material that's being taught, not because they have to, but because they're fondly interested in the information. But before you can even get kids to start to do that, the ultimate, in my mind, is to get them to trust you. You've got to develop relationships with those students before you can get really into learning.
Okay, so what does this philosophy look like in your classroom, April?
If you were to walk into my classroom, you would witness students exploring, testing, walking around, looking at each other's projects that they're building, or if they're constructing or drawing. You would see them talking to each other, asking themselves questions, finding out how they might have done it a little bit differently than maybe you and I, or maybe the next person next to them.
And what ways do you develop relationships with your students so that they really know you care?
That takes some time. It's not something that you can develop overnight. You need to get to know your kids, and when they walk in your room, the first thing is, who are they? Who really are they? And it takes me some time, but I try to find out. Right now, in the middle of the year, I could tell you something about every single one of my students. A lot of times I try to go to their extracurricular activities. I try to find out what's important to them, and then when they come in, hi Bill, or hi Bob, or hi Sally, how was your night last night? How was your game last night? How was the concert last night? And they tend to say, Mrs. Kosin, you remember that? I do. And I think that takes time to build that with those kids, to be able to let them learn to trust you.
Is that the same thing when you're coaching? Because I know
coaching is the exact same way. In fact, coaching and teaching coincide. You lead, you guide them, but you hopefully that they perform for you, that they learn to trust you, and that it's okay to make mistakes. The one thing I tell my students, what's the worst case scenario? We're wrong. I'm wrong all the time. And I think that's really important for them.
Okay. So what evidence do you see and hear from your students that helps you know that they are learning?
the excitement. A great example is today. If you would have walked in my classroom today, Mrs. Kosin, come over here, let me show you. They were working on circuits, and they were showing me different conductors that work and what didn't work. But the excitement, the conversations, the formal conversations, a lot of times I use what is called the ticket out the door. What's something that you learned today? What is something else you need, or more information you need? Or what's something else you would like to continue learning about the topic that we were doing that day? But it's a continuation, it's a development. And again, I still use tests and quizzes, just like everyone else. But most importantly is what is it that they're really getting out of it, and what is it that they need to know more about? And I do a lot of reflection.
A lot of reflection. So you were telling me before we started that you have the blue sheets of paper on your tables with questions. So what's the purpose of those questions?
I start out the school year, I tend to be the facilitator at the beginning of the school year because the kids haven't developed yet my expectations of what I'm looking for. And once they start to trust you as a teacher, you tend to see all the kids starting to participate in conversations, but a lot of times it's the teacher who's always asking the questions, trying to get the kids to talk and to communicate, and then I tend to be the facilitator to ask them questions to ask each other. Well, we developed questions, and I put them on my desk. I taped them on each of my desks, and they're questions for them to start thinking about, for them to ask each other. And I'm hoping they develop their own questioning. Where is it that they want more information? Maybe is it something that they may ask their peers that they might learn more from because they're learning how to ask each other their own questions.
Okay.
So it's a continuation of development.
And really helping them engage in conversations. And listen to one another. Okay.
And to trust each other.
Okay.
If you learn that trust, to trust within the classroom, they're not as afraid to take those risks. Because I think sometimes kids sit in the back of a classroom and not say anything because they're afraid that they might be wrong or that they don't know the information. But deep down, a lot of times those kids know just as much as anyone else does.
Just a matter of having them articulate it and feel comfortable
to do it.
So how do you know that kids know that you believe in them?
That's a hard question. When you get kids to trust you, and when they come back, the most purposeful thing for me, or the most meaningful, is when they write you letters, or they come back. When they walk in your classroom and they walk out, I get to spend an hour with them. Then they walk out of the classroom, but when they come back to your door and they're excited to say, Mrs. Kosin, I got an A on my math test, or Mrs. Kosin, I got an A on history, or whatever it might be, it's the extra things that they do with that interaction with you that I learn that they trust me. They're also willing to take those risks in the classroom. And sometimes you've got to dig deeper as a teacher to find some of those other students that don't necessarily always want to tell you those things. Those are the kids that you tend to want to build even stronger relationships with because they need to learn to trust you too.
So they can feel safe to
and
share.
It is. It's the safety, it's the knowing that I'm going to be okay with whatever they're going to tell me.
Because it is a risk for kids to speak up in class and to share their ideas, maybe when they're uncertain about things. So they have to feel safe in order to do that.
And you've got to develop that within your classroom, and that takes time. And the time that you're willing to spend with them, I think just walking around having conversations with your students as they're working and finding out what it is that they do know and what they understand and what they might not understand. And it's okay not to understand.
So those are ways for you to really understand what the students understand so you can know which questions to ask next and where to take the curriculum.
And where to develop the next lesson. A lot of times you develop lessons, but my lessons change daily depending on what the kids get and what they don't, or what other questions that they might have for me.
So how do you know that your students feel powerful in your classroom?
I allow them to voice their concerns. I do what is called a classroom meeting, and I begin that at the very beginning of the school year. We develop the classroom norms, but I ask them, what is it that they want to see in this room? What is it that they like throughout their education? What is something that they would like to see changed? What is something maybe I could do as a teacher that would help them feel safer in the classroom? What are some ideas that they would like to see happen? And once we get that established, I continue to use classroom meetings throughout the school year to find out what might be better for them. Could the classroom be arranged a little bit differently? What else would they like to see changed, or maybe what they like to continue doing throughout the school year? But I allow them to voice that. And what I really appreciate from my students is I'll be doing a lesson and the kids will say, and they use the time out, Mrs. Kosin, time out, just because I'm a coach, time out, Mrs. Kosin, I'm not getting this. And they're willing to do that. And I think that takes a lot from kids.
So you're really purposeful in empowering them.
I'm trying very hard.
So what's one story that exemplifies your belief in children?
When looking at that question, I brought a couple letters from students that I think helps really bring out the answer to this question. I won't say the kids' names, but a young lady who I had a couple years ago. A few of the words are a little bit personal, so I'm just going to hit key points. I wouldn't be on the varsity basketball team without you telling me that I could do it. Mrs. Kosin, you made my 8th and 9th grade 2 of the best grades ever. I'm in the IB program because you helped me believe that I could do it. So thank you for everything. A young man who thought he was never going to get through school, he thought as an 8th grader that I remember him saying to me, Mrs. Kosin, I'm never going to be able to get through the next 4 years. And I kept saying, yes, you can. You'll be fine. You're going to be great. And these are some words that he had written. You are very optimistic about the success of your students and were always there to help us whenever we needed it. You pushed us to try our best even in situations where we weren't the most comfortable. Students always came first in your class. I remember having chronic back pain, and you helped me by calling my mom to let her know just how bad it was hurting. You even excused me from that day's homework. It's the little things that a person remembers, and I remember you personally caring for your students. I also admire how you gave individual feedback to every student. It would be nice to have more teachers who are very passionate, high energy, personable, and fun in the subject that they teach. Looking back, you are one of the main reasons I wanted to become a teacher. Your passion for learning, caring for students is amazing. Thanks for making a positive impact on me.
Well, that's wonderful to get that kind of feedback and to have an understanding of how kids view you and for you to take the time to really get to know them. It's a wonderful thing.
It makes me feel good as a person, and it makes me feel good knowing that I can make a difference. You had asked me a question earlier about how I derived my philosophy for teaching, and I never really answered that. I love teaching because and I might get a little choked up, I was 13 years old and my mom passed away, and so I really didn't have the extra. And it was my teachers and coaches who made me the person I was, and I knew at 15 years old I was going to come back and become a teacher to do the same thing that they gave me. And I think that's why I love teaching so much. I love the kids.
Well, that's powerful. So we don't always think about the experiences or the stories that our teachers have that help shape them into the way that they engage students. So it's really powerful to hear you talk about that. And thank you for sharing that.
I appreciate
so
that.
If you could change anything in education, what would it be and why?
I would change grades. If I could have every student walk in my room and just tell them, you know what? Every single one of you have an A. I'm going to put an A in that grade book. Let's forget about the grades. Now let's get down to the learning. I think sometimes students have so much anxiety and worry about what they need to do to get the A, not necessarily about what they're learning and the process through which they're learning it. So that would be the one thing I would change.
That would be a big change, wouldn't it?
It would be huge, but that would be one thing I would try to change. That would be it.
The different ways we could help kids understand and develop other skills besides the academic skills as well, the feedback.
And the feedback, and I think sometimes they worry so much, and I know that it's important, but if we could get past some of that, I think they would be more willing to take those risks.
Right. So, April, I believe that there's nothing more powerful in education than a teacher who can articulate a clear philosophy of teaching and learning, and then walk into that teacher's classroom and feel the philosophy in action. And I've had the opportunity to be in your classroom just a few times, but I can definitely sense that when I'm in there, and I know I talk to lots of different people who really, really appreciate you as a teacher and as a coach and the difference you make.
Thank you.
So I just want to tell you how much I appreciate that, how fortunate we are to have you here in Clarkston along with your family, and the huge difference you make. So I want to thank everyone for tuning in to the show today. As you can clearly see, we have terrific, knowledgeable, and passionate people who teach in Clarkston, and that's what makes such a big difference about living and learning here in Clarkston. And again, I hope that at dinner tonight as a family, your children will enthusiastically recall their experiences from school, that you will ask them questions about their experiences, and that you'll enjoy your precious time together. Thank you very much.